Welcome to the Icons with Rick Horrow. Each month we go in depth with a central figure in the world of sports. This month, as college football kicks off, we sit down with the Senior Associate Athletic Director of one of the marquee programs in sport. We'll introduce you to the Executive Senior Associate AD for External Affairs for the Texas Longhorns, Drew Martin. Let's get started by going inside the Icons.
Martin was born and raised in Memphis and graduated from Mississippi State in 1996 with a degree in communications and public relations. He worked as a student assistant in Bulldog Athletics before briefly working at the Big 12 Conference office after graduation. Since then, Martin has held senior staff level roles at Texas A&M, TCU, and his current position at the University of Texas. In Austin, he oversees licensing, brand management, marketing, and communications. Martin is one of the first openly gay people in executive leadership of an elite college program in history. He married his husband Blake in Washington, D.C. in 2005. At the time, they couldn't legally marry in their home state of Texas. He's been an active leader across college sports and LGBTQ awareness and inclusion.
You have had a very diverse career in college athletics between Texas A&M and TCU, and you started with the Big 12 office. You've been in 20 years. What's the big differences you've noticed between being a Longhorn and where you've been before?
You know, there's just an elevated exposure and emphasis on the University of Texas. That is such a global brand that everything here that we do is scrutinized, is looked at, and is just elevated on the national stage and global stage. So that's the biggest difference.
Well, and your reputation has been to provide some enhanced game day experiences for fans. You've got fans who come out of the woodwork, literally. You've had 100 plus. Mm-hmm. What was the record that you set?
Just north of 103.5 against USC.
Do you, by the way, from your demographic tracking, do you have the name, address, and blood type of every single individual there? How do you do that?
I think if we could get to that level, I would have solved a lot of people's problems.
But so the game day experience, obviously very important. What are some of the novel things you've done since you got here?
You know, I think the two biggest that have gained so much of the exposure are Bevo Boulevard, where we closed down San Jac, the street that runs just to the west of the stadium, and turned that into more of a carnival atmosphere. I mean, it
San Jacinto, right?
San Jacinto, yes.
San Jacinto.
So we turned that into just a walking, basic carnival, art festival, you know, whatever you want to call it. We're talking about calling it a midway at some point, you know, with food trucks and sponsor activations and inflatables for kids. And really the concept with that and Longhorn City Limits, which is a concert series that happens before football games, the concept was giving people a reason to come to campus. You know, we're asking you to spend an entire Saturday with us. Well, beyond the football game, what else are we providing you the opportunity? Why should you get to campus early? Why should you spend the day on campus? And so these were concepts that we brought to the University of Texas, and out of the gates, it was amazing to see how many people really showed up for that first game against Tulsa and packed that boulevard. By the time that the team got here 2 hours prior to kickoff, it was so full, it was almost a single file line for the guys to walk down the street to get into the stadium. And what a great way to welcome the team in.
Clearly, and I guess one of the issues too is the legacy of being a Longhorn and doing things a certain way versus you got to have some new thinking as well. So how do you balance all of that?
Well, you know, that is an excellent point, and we had to find the juxtaposition between really elevating and embracing the Longhorn traditions. You know, for example, Bevo, the most revered mascot in all of college sport. I mean,
it's Bevo, what number
it's
is
Bevo
it?
15.
Is Bevo 15 okay? Is he healthy?
Oh, he's fantastic.
Okay.
He's fantastic. He's a young steer.
Good.
So he
we're happy,
1,800 pounds of pure steer, and it's his boulevard. So we came up with the concept of let's elevate it, let's get him back to the fans, let's get him out of the trailer and walk him down the boulevard and into the stadium, as opposed to what it used to be, which was just drive him in, drop him off, and he goes straight to his pen. Why not have exposure to the fan base out there? Now, I will admit, the first time we did it, and I was a big proponent of this, and they get him out of the trailer, and I'm standing right there, and I thought, that's a large animal.
And there's by the way, the shortest tenure in the history of University of Texas, Bevo's on the loose, ladies and gentlemen.
Bevo is on the loose. I'd probably need to escape the country at that point.
Yeah, I think you probably would. There is a notion that when you go to all these seminars, I'm sure I've been a lot of them, I've been to too, people have created this word decouching. You've got to get people off the couch, come to the game, and the standard argument is, well, we have to have first class. We'll talk about Longhorn Network in a minute. But we have to have standard, good, above the fray first-class television to get people to watch, but you also have to get people to be excited about going to the game. How do you reconcile both of those?
Right, and that is a huge topic of conversation. Part of it is developing other events around the stadium. What is going to get you off the couch? And if it's just the football game that you can watch, any football game in the country with incredible coverage, incredible access, in the locker room, in the post game, in the pregame, practically in the huddle at certain points. What else are we doing? And that has really shown good faith to our fan base that we're serious about wanting them to come. Right. Not expecting them to come, but wanting them to be on campus. When TCU is in the Mountain West, right. We're banging on the door and it's, expand, let us in. Yeah. You get in, you're like, sorry boys, we're not on that train anymore.
And what about branding? You came from Aggies, you came from Horned Frogs,
and now you're Longhorns. I've done this, and now I've done this.
What is that?
That's a horned frog. Yeah, that's a. Can't you see? I can't
Does
see
he hop?
either.
No, I really.
Horned frog is a lizard. It doesn't hop.
Okay, sorry.
But I know where I am by the hand signal that I'm thrown at.
Easy to brand in this context. Everybody knows Longhorns.
It is. Everybody knows Longhorns globally where we go. I was coming back from San Francisco yesterday, and I had a Longhorn pullover on, and I had a gentleman stop me in the airport. No branded, just could have been anybody in the country. And he looked and he goes, "Hook 'em."
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Know what you're doing. Let's talk generally a little bit about college football, given your experience. Then we'll talk about a couple other things. You have and have nots. You are one of the definitive have programs. Clearly, your football revenue is among the top 5 in the country, and yet a lot of the Division I programs are here, and there's the annual pigeon hunt where everybody is paid to play early on. What's your perspective on leveling the playing field now that you're with one of the haves?
It's a distinctly different conversation than other places, and it's like our athletics director Chris Del Conte, who I worked with at TCU at the time, would say, when TCU was in the Mountain West, we're banging on the door and it's expand, let us in. Yeah. You get in, you're like, sorry boys, we're not on that train anymore. Yeah.
And by the way, you share that perception with our buddies from Ohio State and Oklahoma and a few other guys too. So
we do. It is becoming such an arms race. It's become such emphasis is placed on continue to generate that revenue, and where are we going from here? There's not, everybody's looking for that next $30-40 million television bucket, and nobody has found that yet. The first one to it hopefully shares amongst us, but we're certainly on that hunt right now.
Does the Longhorn Network help you with that hunt?
Absolutely. That was a huge step forward. It's certainly the largest third-tier television rights in the country in history, and that absolutely helps us. And to partner with a brand like ESPN, I mean, two of the biggest brands in sport together, that was a tremendous achievement for UT.
Are you all happy with the playoff system? Where's it going? Does it go to 6 teams with byes? Does it go to 8? Do we not know where it goes because the contract's got to run their cycle?
The contract's got to run its cycle. Personally, I like 4. It creates kind of that drama around, which team gets left out is so much part of that conversation. And even before that, other part of me does like the idea of more access. And so if you do go to an 8-team playoff, you can have the 5 Power 5 conference winners. There's room for Notre Dame at that point. It leaves room for 2 more. Are those 2 other Power 5 schools, or there's a group of 5 schools out there deserving to come into the playoff system? There's an argument can be made for that level of excitement as well. But right now, I really like the 4 with one of the leagues always jockeying to figure out who's gonna be left out. It took me a long time to get to. I struggled through that in my 20s. To come to terms even with myself is that crossroads between knowing that I was a gay man, but also knowing that I work in an industry where I didn't see any gay men.
Let's segue into another issue. You're one of the first openly gay men in an upper administration post in college athletics. What's it been like to go through that evolution in an industry that traditionally has been slow to embrace that?
Sure. That's something that it took me a long time to get to. I struggled through that in my 20s. To come to terms even with myself is that crossroads between knowing that I was a gay man, but also knowing that I work in an industry where I didn't see any gay men. Yeah. And so could those two things coexist? And finally reached a point where I had convinced myself early on that those couldn't exist, so I just stayed in the closet and kept that very hidden. To a point where that was doing so much internal, psyche damage to me as who I am as an individual, that I had to make the choice to come out and risk being told, there's the door, we don't have room for you here. And fortunately, and to my pleasant surprise, I was fully embraced and have been embraced at Texas A&M, have been embraced at TCU, have been embraced at the University of Texas. And really it has become a non-issue for me, for my husband. And I'm watching sport change and embrace. And if you look at the history, sport has been that great social equalizer. Whether we talk about, race relations, or whether we talk about, gender equality, And certainly now LGBT and what we do with the transgender community now has become a hot topic item as well. But I'm thrilled to watch it progress, and I'm proud to have been on the forefront of that change.
And we'll talk about that in a minute, the inspirational quality of what you've done. But as you pondered when you would come out, the fact that you're in the South, did that make your concern even larger, that here's what you might have expected in the South?
It probably did. I grew up in Memphis. I went to school at Mississippi State. Yeah. I worked at the Big 12 in Dallas, Texas. I moved further south to College Station, Texas, a little bit north to Fort Worth, Texas, and then back again south to Austin.
You're running out of places to go.
I'm running out of places to go in the state of Texas. I really think that does play into the mindset, but I think it's an unfair comparison because my husband's from Jackson, Mississippi. I grew up in Memphis. Both of our families, from young ages, that was not a topic of conversation that was off the table or off limits. So we've been surrounded by supported people. I think when you look at the South as a whole, so many negative connotations come up, particularly around race and sexuality and across the board. You think of prejudice in that vein, and frankly, while I've seen it, I haven't experienced it, not personally. So while mentally it might provide a block there, it did not play out that way. I think that was mostly something I had created in my head.
Maybe it's also a commentary on the power of sports to be able to allow you to act as an inspiration, not just of what you've done, but how you've positioned it and how you've characterized it from your perspective. Talk about that for a minute.
So for me, sport, we preach, this mentality of, one team, one heartbeat. It's this locker room. It's us against the world. It's a family. It's this, and so it creates this oneness. And while that's a really, really positive thing, one of the negative aspects of it is if you are different than. If you are in a locker room full of oneness, but you are an anomaly in that oneness, it can create some friction there. But a lot of the student athletes that I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with over the last almost decade, or really decade plus, they have come to find that is true regardless of their identity, that they are still in that family, that they are still part of that one heartbeat. It just might be that they're a little bit different than everybody else in the room, and that's perfectly okay.
But you're an inspiration not only for the athletes, but for aspiring front office people all over the sports industry. Talk about that.
So in 2014, when I did a public article with Outsports and Sid Ziegler there, I was really amazed at the outpouring, not only of support, but of other people like me who were in positions and wanted to progress and move up in the industry, and the amount of just at the base level of thank you for telling your story, because like me in my 20s and early 30s, I didn't see anybody else that looked like me. I had the opportunity to show that this is what it looks like, and to be open and honest publicly, nationally, with my story, so that others could say, you know what, I can do that too. There's nothing magic about what I did. I just one day stepped out and said, I can't hide this anymore. I want to be who I am at all cost. And it wound up, fortunately, inspiring others to be able to do the same.
More from Drew Martin in a moment. But first, let's look at U.S. Polo ASSN's involvement with USA Today in the biggest night in high school sports.
It was the biggest night of the year in high school sports, and some of the biggest names in sports and entertainment were there to celebrate. The USA Today High School Sports Awards premiered on August 5 with U.S. Polo ASSN as the presenting sponsor. Michael Strahan and Rob Gronkowski served as hosts, announcing male and female athletes of the year in 25 sports. For the first time in history, the sport of polo was included in the awards, and two phenomenal athletes came out on top. On the women's side, Hope Arellano, and at 15 years old, she won the Junior Westchester Cup for the U.S. in England. At 17, she became the highest-rated American women's polo player. And last winter, Arellano competed in high goal tournaments against the best women and men in the world. For the men, Mackenzie Wise, a polo tournament competitor since the age of 6, Wise annually competes in Argentina, Santa Barbara, and Florida. He started playing high goal polo at age 16 with Las Monjitas in the 2020 Gauntlet of Polo. Wise's team won the CV Whitney Cup and advanced to the Gold Cup semifinals. You can see profiles of Hope and Mackenzie and all of the USA Today High School Sports Awards presented by US Polo ASSN. Winners online, sportsawards.usatoday.com. Have you thought about what the NCAA and what the institution, but also what college sports can do to help facilitate what you've done to be a bigger and greater inspiration in the future?
Absolutely, and I think I serve on the leadership committee of the NCAA Common Ground program, and that specifically is aimed at the intersectionality between LGBT people and people of faith at college institutions, faith-based, non-faith-based, private institutions, as well as secular public institutions, to be able to facilitate dialogue and provide protection and inclusion and welcoming of people of deep religious faith and LGBT people within the athletics programs. And what does that look like? At the very base layer, we provide the constructs for conversation on these campuses so they're using the correct language, they're understanding each other from each vantage point, and creating that common ground to have those conversations. So I think that's one area that's very specific when you're talking specifically about people of faith and LGBT people. I think the NCAA and the schools specifically, there's so many wonderful organizations out there that have educational resources and curricula that they can bring to campuses to help educate at the base layer with the student athlete advisory committees on campuses, with the coaching staffs, with the administrators. It goes top to bottom, that you have from the highest levels of leadership all the way down, to the incoming freshman that has no idea. They get on campus and it's just wide-eyed, don't even know where anything is yet. But to be able to have that type of dialogue and that type of dialect that provides that inclusive environment.
10 years from now, where do you predict it goes?
Inclusion, handbooks and policies adopted by the NCAA and enforced by the NCAA on the membership really is the starting point for these dialogues. And I think in 10 years, my hope is that it's a non-issue, that it doesn't really matter, gay, straight, transgender, black, white, it's all sport, it's all athlete. It's all about the competition and not at all about the differences. In fact, I hope that we embrace the differences. My philosophy has always been if you can allow a student athlete to overcome any perceived adversity, whether that is within in my case, within your sexuality or sexual orientation, or whether that's within a learning disability, whether that's within a physical disability, a socioeconomic disparity, if you can create a system where you eliminate the energy spent on emphasizing and thinking about and concentrating on that aspect, it allows for the opportunity for the brain and the body to really focus on the physical aspects of competition. I think you elevate to a completely different level when you free yourself from those constraints. I think that no matter what, there's always communities, pockets, families. There will always be somewhere out there struggling with who they are. Yeah. And so I think that staying visible, staying relevant, being cognizant when I speak at conventions or when I speak to groups that I talk about my husband.
as far as the normal business of sports. Does it come a time in the, well, first of all, how do you reconcile those? And
Sure.
come a time in the near future where you're focusing 100% on your day job, let's say, and people have accepted so much of what you're doing that you don't feel the need to talk about this anymore?
Right. I don't know that there ever comes a time like that. I think that no matter what, there's always communities, pockets, families. There will always be somewhere out there struggling with who they are.
Yeah.
And so I think that, you know, staying visible, staying relevant, of being cognizant when I speak at conventions or when I speak to groups that I talk about my husband and use those words specifically so that people see it is very natural to me. I used to hesitate for a second. I used to really gauge the room to see, do I say this or do I say that? And now I have gotten to that point where it is just me. It is just me speaking about my experience in my life. And that includes, you know, my family, my husband, my dogs. You know, I'm just a normal human being that is very passionate about collegiate sports.
Our normal human being who's an associate AD, 5 years from now, you're an AD. Where is it?
Where will they have me? Who calls first? No, wherever it is will have to be a good fit, and that starts with the head of the organization, whether a chancellor or president, a trustee board, a regents board. You know, it has to be comfortable, and I will say it again, my husband has to be on board. It has to be somewhere where we feel like we can live, where we can thrive in that community, where we are accepted and embraced. You know, that's the only way that this works.
At your investiture as the AD, we get your first interview. Deal?
Deal.
Thank you,
How about
man.
that?
Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Top of mind for administrators in high school and college all over the country is how to maximize participation and diversity in all kinds of competition, not just sports. The National Speech and Debate Association say 160,000 debaters in high school all across the country and about 13,000 of them in the state of Florida. And Houston's study with City Foundation says they're more likely to have a 50 to 70 point higher in the SATs and a 0.6% higher GPA. Well, makes sense, therefore, that the Florida Department of Education created the Civics and Debate Initiative to move the process forward. Now, what about sports? Well, 150 million of us watch the Super Bowl, and we always agree to disagree, but we're passionate about it, we're civil about it, and we usually hug it out at the end. That's why sports and debate are so critical and so intertwined. The state created the Civics and Debate sports component, and I'm honored enough to be part of that and help lead the effort in Florida. Can athletes be paid? What about eligibility? Who's the greatest of all time? Brady? Jordan? We don't know, but high school students will be debating that all over Florida this fall and will become a model for all states to follow.